Shalom, everybody. This is Gavril. I want to talk about Israel's wars in the Gaza Strip since disengagement in August of 2005 when we finally left the Strip. We pulled all 10,000 of our civilians out and all of our army bases. We left Gaza for good, at least the thinking was. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of what happened and then a moral analysis. I want to give a couple of caveats right here. What I say here probably will not be popular. I am a right winger. I'm a right wing hawk. I think we should be very tough on our enemies. But a lot of what I'm going to say, I think, is going to surprise people. So, Israel leaves the Gaza Strip in August of 2005, uprooting all of its army bases, its civilian communities. It was a very, very emotionally painful thing to watch Israeli soldiers throwing Jews out of their homes. I remember watching it happen. I remember it very well. I was actually visiting at the time it happened. And these are communities that I had been to in many cases, several of them anyway. We pull out August 2005. The Palestinian Authority assumes control of the entire Gaza Strip. The next year, 2006, Hamas wins elections. At that point, they step up rocket fire. There had been rocket fire since the early 2000s, but it was always sporadic. And because the PA was there and because the IDF was there, it was always very, very easy to keep a lid on it. It never really got out of control. It was a much more rarer occurrence than it is now. In 2006, the summer of 2006, a cross-border raid on the part of Hamas ended up killing several soldiers and ended up with the capture and kidnap of a soldier named Gilad Shalit, who's been very famous in the media since. And what this is the first act of Hamas militant aggression towards Israel post-withdrawal in 2005. So the thinking is we give these people the Gaza Strip, maybe that'll be a nice down payment towards peace. Wrong. That tipped off a mini war. It lasted about 4 months. It was kind of a low-intensity conflict, but it was called in English, what's called Operation Summer Rains. The goal of which was to recover Gilad Shalit, the captured soldier, and to put an end to Hamas's rocket launching. And to be fair, it did. They were able to secure an end of Hamas rocket fire in November 2006, roughly, until May of 2007 when it resumed. But yeah, and theoretically, the IDF put an end to Hamas rocket fire, but a big part of that was that the PA, the Palestinian Authority security forces, were able to deploy into the Strip, and they kept a lid on it. We did not recover Gilad Shalit. So what happened during this operation and the cross-border raid? 11 Israelis were killed, 5 soldiers and 6 civilians. There were 38 soldiers wounded. 1 soldier was captured, that was Gilad Shalit, and 44 civilians was injured. Now, on the Palestinian side in Gaza, there were 402 killed. 277 militants, terrorists, 117 civilians, 6 policemen, 2 presidential guards. Those might as well be counted as terrorists too because of the entities they work for. There are about 1,000 Palestinians injured, and we captured about 65 Palestinian militant officials. Okay, so that's Operation Summer Rains. In May 2007, Hamas seizes total control of the Gaza Strip. It expels the Palestinian Authority from Gaza. So we no longer have that buffer force in Gaza willing to put an end to the rocket fire if need be. And rocket fire intensifies starting in May 2007. Israelis are sporadically injured, sporadically killed by this rocket fire, but we don't really do much about it until in late winter 2008. At that point, we had been observing a ceasefire with Hamas, and they broke it. And they began, up at that point, up until that time, what had been the worst rocket barrages against us. And so, of course, we had to respond. We started bombing Hamas targets in the Strip, and we launched a ground invasion. So this is the second war we fought in Gaza since leaving in 2005. This is Operation Cast Lead. It lasted from December till January, I want to say, 2008 to 2009. 3 weeks and 1 day, so it was shy of a month. And that was a particularly nasty war. On the Israeli side, we lost 13 guys. Sadly, 10 of those were killed by friendly fire. We lost 3 civilians. We had 518 wounded. Of those, 336 were soldiers, 182 were civilians. Total losses on the Palestinian side are disputed, but the common figure is there were 1,417. About 700 of those are considered to be Hamas fighters, so roughly half. And the way they fought, using children as human shields and firing from hospitals and schools, obviously that increased the civilian death toll. We wounded 5,303 of them, and we captured a total of 120. In addition, 1 Egyptian border guard officer was killed by Hamas fire. So that's our second war since leaving in 2005. And the goals of this, the entire intention, was to get Hamas to stop firing rockets again and to secure the release of Gilad Shalit. It's 2008, 2009. It's 3 years later. He's still captured in Gaza. We haven't gotten him back. We fought 2 wars over trying to get him back and to get rocket fire to stop, and it didn't work. So that's our second war since leaving Gaza. Fast forward to 2012. This was not as well covered by the international media, but this is Operation Pillar of Defense. It was an 8-day, basically 1 week and a day battle, which we bombed Gaza and we sent troops in on foot into Gaza. The whole point, again, was to put a stop to rocket fire. It was precipitated by a salvo of 100 rockets being fired at us in a 24-hour period. And there was also an attack on an IDF patrol near the border. And so in this 8-day period, again, we're trying to get the rocket fire to stop, and we're trying to secure the release of Gilad Shalit. We killed Ahmed Jabari. He was a particularly nasty character. He was the chief of the Gaza military wing of Hamas. He was killed in an airstrike. I remember reading about him quite a bit. At the end of all of this, both sides claimed victory. We got their rocket fire to stop. Yeah, for about a week. And of course, they claimed that they bested us. Yada, yada, yada. In that 8-day period, we had 2 soldiers killed, 20 soldiers wounded, Um, on the Palestinian side, 58 militants killed. I'm sorry, 55 militants killed and 29 militants wounded. That figure is disputed. The IDF claims it was 120 combatants killed and 101 combatants injured. The Palestinians claim that they lost 105 civilians, 971 wounded. The IDF claims it's 57. Hamas has a history of listing its own fighters as civilians, so something to keep in mind. And 8 Palestinians were executed by Hamas during this war as well. It's believed they were executed for being informers. 4 Israeli civilians were killed, 219 injured. And yeah, that's the third war we fought in Gaza since leaving in 2005. Yoo-ha. Fast forward 2 summers ahead. Operation Protective Edge in the summer of 2014. It lasted 7 weeks. It was almost a 2-month war. This one is a little bit more personal for me because this is the one I actually fought in. My daughter was born while I was on the ground in Gaza. I was pretty badly hurt while I was there. And I lost more than one friend when I was there too. Same thing. It was precipitated by rocket fire. It was also precipitated by Hamas kidnapping and murdering 3 teenage Israelis in Yehuda v'Shamron, Judea and Samaria. And to distract from the manhunt for the terrorists that did that, they began launching rockets into Israel, which, I mean, at that point, they launched farther than they'd ever reached before. Some of these rockets actually reached across Israel proper and into Yehuda v'Shamron. One landed just outside of Hebron. There were several rockets intercepted by Iron Dome in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv. So it was pretty serious. And so, again, to put a stop to rocket fire, something that we had already fought 3 wars over since leaving in 2005, again, we pummeled the Gaza Strip with airstrikes, and we went in to root out their terror infrastructure and to destroy the tunnels they've been using to infiltrate the country. We lost 67 soldiers and 6 civilians. 469 soldiers and 87 civilians were injured. About 2,310 Palestinians were killed. More than 10,000 were wounded. It's disputed. Israel claims that about half of those killed were combatants. Hamas says it's about 70%, but I don't believe a word that comes out of their mouth. And at least 23 Gazans are executed by Hamas during the conflict. Again, they're believed to be collaborators. Just last week, about a week ago, Hamas, there was a special forces mission into Gaza to install monitoring equipment. At least that's what it's believed to be. Was the cause of it. And so a very elite unit called Maglan, or Unit 212. And they were in civilian clothes and in a civilian vehicle, and they were stopped at a Hamas checkpoint where it was somehow they were exposed or they were discovered, and a firefight ensued. A firefight in which, the team leader, quote unquote, Lieutenant Colonel M, was killed. Another officer was badly injured, and 7 Hamas fighters, including the head of Hamas's Izzadin al-Qassam brigades in the southern Gaza Strip, was also killed. Our guys, made it back inside Israel safely for the most part, And over the next 24 hours, Hamas fired 500 rockets. That's the largest count in one day. They injured, I believe it's 60 some people, and they killed one man. Ironically, the one man they killed was a Palestinian living in Ashkelon as a worker. He worked in Ashkelon in the construction business. It's very sad. And reserve units were called up. We started hitting Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. And this would have been our fifth ground war to stop Hamas from launching rockets at us. Fifth since leaving in 2005. This isn't like 5 times over the course of a century. This is 5 times, more or less, over the course of a decade since leaving. And we have not solved the problem. That's absurd. That's absolutely absurd. And here's going to be the part where I'm going to lose some people, I think. I place the totality of the moral failure and the civilian casualties on both sides and the deaths of our soldiers on us. I hold us morally responsible for that. I don't hold Hamas morally responsible for that. There's nothing in their history that says they can be held morally responsible for everything. They don't have the concept. Okay? These are people espousing a brutal 7th century ideology. I can't reason with them. I can't hold them to any degree of moral accountability. All I can do is I can protect myself from them, in theory. And that's what our government has failed to do. During World War II, the Allies killed millions of Germans and Japanese. Most of the casualties suffered by Germany and Japan were not military casualties. No one blames the Allies for that today. And why is that? Because they fought to win and they put an end to it. They rid the world of a great evil, and they made sure that Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan became non-entities, basically. They could inflict no more evil on the world. And that's why it was morally palatable to bomb the hell out of Dresden, out of Hamburg, out of Hiroshima, out of Tokyo, Yokohama. It's terrible. War is terrible. It's quite possibly one of the supreme evils in human affairs. But it's absolutely necessary. And if you're going to do it, you need to do it right. What makes Israel's wars in the Gaza Strip immoral to me? We have not rid the world of the evil that's plaguing us there. And we have not solved the problem. We have not made ourselves any safer. We go in and we quote unquote mow the grass, and within 2 to 4 years, we have to do it again and get more of our people killed, more of our soldiers killed. We have to kill more of their civilians. It doesn't have to be this way. It really does. That's what makes it immoral. We're choosing to do the bare minimum and to put off down the road every few years actually solving the problem. There is no way you can completely avoid civilian casualties in war. There's absolutely no, and there's no army in the world that takes greater pains to avoid them. There really isn't. Not in Europe, not in North America, nowhere. It's unavoidable that it's going to happen. You know going into war that innocent people on the other side are going to die. You know that. What makes that moral is that you see it through. What would make Israel's wars in the Gaza Strip moral if there had only been one war. In 2006, 1 year after the Gaza withdrawal, a cross border raid that kills and kidnaps our soldiers and that sees rockets fired into our cities should have been proof positive that it's time to put an end to Gaza's self rule. That should have ended in 2000. It never should have happened. The withdrawal never should have happened in 2005. But once it did, it should have ended in 2006. Instead, we fought that war, another war in 2008, 2009, another war in 2012, and another war in 2014, and almost another war in 2018. I mean, if you look at the timeline, we're basically overdue for another one. And at the current way we're handling things, that'll be just another war. We'll go in, we'll bomb the shit out of Gaza. We'll temporarily see a reduction in rocket fire and terror attacks towards us. We'll see a good chunk. We'll see a lot of human suffering there. We'll see dead kids out before CNN and Al Jazeera cameras. Again, that's unavoidable when you fight against these people that, like cowards, hide among their own women and children. And we'll lose more of our soldiers and more of our civilians. That's inevitable. More kids killed, more young boys permanently maimed with scars that have been traumatized. And guess what? By 2025, we'll have to do it again. In 2025, we'll have fought probably 6 or 7 wars in Gaza. 6 or 7 wars in 20 years since leaving, if things go the way they continue. You solve the problem, and that makes what you do moral. You go in and you annihilate Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, all these groups. You completely and entirely wipe them from the face of the earth. You kill them in combat. You assassinate their leaders. You get them at the office, at home, do whatever you have to do. The end of a war in Gaza that would be moral would see a lot of people die. But an end of a war fought in Gaza properly would also see Hamas removed from power, its leadership and general membership either completely wiped out with a handful of survivors maybe incarcerated, and it would see us appointing either a leadership that's favorable to us or to directly controlling Gaza at the end of it to make sure that that can't happen again. It would basically undo 2005 and install us as the quote-unquote occupiers over Gaza. We're not occupiers there. We never were occupiers there. According to the League of Nations mandate, that's our land too. But what we can't do is allow self-rule in Gaza that threatens our physical safety, our economic stability, indefinitely. And that's what we're doing. That's what makes our constant military operations in Gaza immoral. They're not aimed at solving the problem. In 1948, we did everything we could to solve the problem. In 56, we did everything we could to solve the problem. 67, we certainly did. Same with 73, 82. Only now, post-Intifada, do we not do what we have to do in order to win and secure our own safety. Let's try this as an analogy. You get diagnosed with cancer, and you have 2 options. Well, we can go in and cut the cancer out, or we can give you a little bit of chemo that'll shrink the tumor, but you'll have to come back in a year or 2 for more chemo. With those kind of options, why wouldn't you get the cancer cut out and be done with it? Why would you choose every 2 to 4 years to have to undergo chemo and do this to you, do this to yourself? The IDF is a military superpower. That does not make constant warfare in Gaza easy. or not hard on the society. Every time we have a war, we have to call up all of our reservists, which takes students out of universities. It takes doctors, nurses, lawyers, judges, policemen, paramedics, engineers, construction workers, takes them out of the workforce for however long the war lasts. The average seems to be about a month. It does untold billions of dollars of damage to our economy every time we have to do this. It costs us unimaginable reputation loss in the media, who's never going to be fair to us anyway, so I don't know why we bother playing by their rules. For Israel's actions in Gaza to be moral, the next time has to be the last time. That's all.